I never thought I'd be standing here at 69 years old, watching my own family circle like vultures. But life has a way of revealing people's true colors when money and property enter the equation. My name is Eleanor Caldwell, and for nearly 7 decades, I've lived a life built on hard work, honesty, and family values. My late husband, Richard, and I weren't wealthy by national standards, but here in our small Connecticut town, our 3-bedroom colonial house on Maple Street and the 5 acres of land behind it made us comfortable. We raised our son Michael here, saved carefully, and built what I thought was a legacy of love. That was before the arthritis in my hands grew so bad I could barely hold a pen. Before Richard's heart gave out 3 years ago, and long before I discovered what my daughter-in-law Patricia and my grandson Tyler were planning behind my back. It began innocently enough. Patricia started visiting more often after Richard passed. She'd bring homemade meals, always my favorites, and offer to help around the house. "You shouldn't be climbing ladders at your age, Eleanor," she'd say, reaching up to change light bulbs or dust the ceiling fans. She'd drive me to doctor's appointments, helping me navigate the confusing medical forms and insurance paperwork. I was grateful. Michael worked long hours at his accounting firm in Hartford, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark. With their daughter Lily away at college in Boston, Patricia seemed genuinely interested in spending time with me. "Why don't you let me help organize your finances?" she suggested one afternoon, as I struggled to read the fine print on a property tax bill. "I used to work at a bank, remember? I could make sure everything's in order." It seemed reasonable. My eyesight wasn't what it used to be, and the thought of having someone trustworthy handle the increasing paperwork was appealing. Patricia set up a system where she'd bring documents for me to sign, explaining each one in simple terms so I wouldn't feel overwhelmed. "This is just authorizing the property tax payment," she'd say. "This one's for your prescription plan renewal. This is updating your contact information with the insurance company." I signed them all, grateful for the help. What I didn't realize was that among those innocent documents were others, papers transferring partial ownership of my property to Michael and Patricia, forms adding Patricia as a signatory on my bank accounts, and eventually a new will that significantly reduced what would go to my granddaughter Lily and increased Patricia and Tyler's shares. I might never have discovered any of this if not for Lily's surprise visit home from college last Thanksgiving. She'd been studying pre-law and had developed a keen eye for detail. "Grandma," she said, sitting beside me on the porch swing Richard had built for our 40th anniversary, "has Mom been helping you with paperwork?" I nodded, rocking gently as the crisp November air rustled the few remaining leaves on the old maple tree. "She's been a godsend, honey. My eyes aren't what they used to be, and these companies make everything so complicated nowadays." Lily's face grew serious. "Can I see what you've been signing, just to make sure everything's in order?" I thought her concern was sweet but unnecessary. Still, I led her to the cherrywood desk in the study, where I kept my files in neat folders. Richard's military-like organization had rubbed off on me over our 46 years of marriage. Lily spent hours going through the papers, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "Grandma," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you know what these documents actually say?" That evening changed everything. As Lily explained what I'd unwittingly signed, I felt the foundation of my world crack beneath me. The property I'd planned to leave equally to Michael and Lily now showed Patricia's name on the deed. My savings account, which had held $127,743 from Richard's life insurance and our lifetime of careful saving, had dwindled to just under $30,000 through a series of withdrawals I'd never authorized. "They've been taking advantage of you," Lily said, tears welling in her eyes. "They're stealing your legacy, our family's legacy." That night I barely slept. the weight of betrayal pressed against my chest heavier than the arthritis pain ever could. I thought of Richard, how carefully he'd planned for my security after his passing. How proud he was of our modest but debt-free life. What would he say if he knew our son and daughter-in-law were dismantling everything we'd built? By morning, my shock had crystallized into something harder: determination. Richard had always said I was Tennessee tough, a nod to my childhood in the mountains where people didn't have much but protected what was theirs with fierce resolve. "What are we going to do?" Lily asked over coffee, her young face solemn with responsibility no 20-year-old should have to bear. "First," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "we're going to get proof. Then we're going to fix this. Your grandfather didn't raise me to roll over, and I didn't raise your father to be a thief." Lily stayed an extra week, missing classes but assuring me her professors understood family emergency. Together we visited my bank, where the manager, Mr. Reynolds, confirmed the withdrawals, all made with properly signed authorization forms. "But I never signed these," I insisted, examining the signatures. They looked remarkably like mine, but with subtle differences only I would notice. The loop of my C was too wide, the crossing of my T too high. "Mrs. Caldwell," Mr. Reynolds said gently, "these appear to be your signatures. Without evidence of forgery or coercion, the bank can't take action." We left disappointed but not defeated. Outside, Lily took my arm as we walked slowly to the car. "We need a lawyer, Grandma. A good one." Through one of her law professors, Lily arranged a meeting with Catherine Jang, an elder law attorney whose office was in a converted Victorian house downtown. Unlike the sterile corporate offices Michael preferred, Catherine's space felt homey, with comfortable chairs and large print documents. "What you're describing is unfortunately common," Catherine said after hearing our story. "Elder financial abuse often happens within families. The people we trust most are sometimes in the best position to take advantage." "Can we prove it?" I asked. "Can we get my property back?" Catherine didn't sugarcoat it. "It will be difficult. The signatures appear valid, and you've established a pattern of allowing Patricia to handle your finances. But difficult doesn't mean impossible." She outlined a strategy. First, I would revoke all powers previously given to Patricia through a formal legal notification. Second, we would document everything, every unauthorized withdrawal, every suspicious document. Finally, we would gather evidence of coercion or deception, perhaps through witness testimony from my doctor about my eyesight issues, or by proving the signatures were forged. Most importantly, Catherine said, locking eyes with me, "You need to decide how far you're willing to go. This could mean criminal charges against your son and daughter-in-law. It will certainly mean confrontation. Family relationships may be permanently damaged." I thought of Richard, of the 46 Christmas mornings we'd shared watching Michael open presents. I thought of holding newborn Tyler in my arms, and later Lily, marveling at how love could expand so effortlessly to embrace new generations. Then I thought of the betrayal, not just of me, but of Richard's memory and the values we'd spent a lifetime upholding. "I want what's rightfully mine," I said finally. "And I want them to understand what they've done. If that means criminal charges, so be it." Lily squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and sadness. When we left Catherine's office, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Having a plan, even a difficult one, was better than feeling helpless. But the hardest part was yet to come. That evening, I called Michael and asked him and Patricia to come for dinner the following night. "Nothing fancy," I said, "just family time." I didn't mention that Lily was still in town. They believed she had returned to Boston days ago. The next day, I prepared Richard's famous pot roast recipe, moving slowly around the kitchen that had been the heart of our home for decades. Lily helped, chopping vegetables and setting the table with the good china, another gesture Richard would have appreciated. "Are you ready for this?" she asked as 5 o'clock approached. I smoothed my hands over the tablecloth, feeling the slight tremor that was partly age and partly anxiety. "No," I admitted, "but sometimes the right things are the hardest things." They arrived punctually at 6, Michael in his business suit, Patricia carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the pearl necklace I'd noticed had disappeared from my jewelry box months ago. I said nothing about the pearls, serving dinner with the practiced grace of a woman who'd hosted countless family meals. We made it through the main course with small talk, Michael's work, the unseasonably warm weather, neighborhood gossip. It wasn't until I brought out coffee and Richard's favorite apple pie that I cleared my throat and changed the subject. "I've been going through some financial papers," I said casually, watching Patricia's hand pause mid-reach for her coffee cup. "Oh?" Michael said, his tone neutral but his eyes suddenly alert. "Anything I can help with, Mom?" "Actually, I've already gotten help," I replied, nodding toward the hallway where Lily emerged from the guest room. "Lily's been staying with me this past week." Patricia's face drained of color. Michael's expression hardened. "Lily, I thought you were back at school." "Surprise," Lily said, her voice steady despite the tension crackling through the dining room. She sat down beside me, a united front against the two people across the table. "What's going on here?" Michael demanded, his tone shifting from confusion to defensiveness. "Is this some kind of ambush?" "I've seen the documents, Dad," Lily said, opening a folder she'd brought with her. "The property transfers, the bank withdrawals, everything." Patricia's hand flew to the pearls at her neck. "Eleanor, I don't know what Lily's been telling you, but we've only been trying to help manage your affairs. You agreed to all of this." "Did I agree to have $98,000 withdrawn from my savings account?" I asked quietly. "Did I agree to have my property transferred into your names while I'm still very much alive and capable?" Michael leaned forward, his voice taking on the condescending tone he sometimes used with clients he considered difficult. "Mom, we've been protecting your assets, setting things up so you don't have to worry about probate or estate taxes later. It's all for your benefit." "By emptying my accounts?" My voice remained calm, though I felt anything but. "By changing my will to cut Lily out of her fair share." "That's not," Patricia began, but Michael cut her off with a sharp glance. "You're getting older, Mom," he said flatly. "Your health is declining. Someone needs to make sure everything's handled properly. And that someone should be taking nearly $100,000 of my money? Wearing my jewelry?" I touched my neck, watching Patricia's hand reflexively mirror the gesture. "Those pearls were your father's gift to me on our 25th anniversary, Patricia. I never gave them to you." The evening devolved quickly after that. Accusations flew. Michael claimed they'd only been borrowing money for some temporary financial difficulties and intended to pay it back. Patricia insisted I'd given her the pearls and simply forgotten. Both maintained that all documents were signed with my full knowledge and consent. "We're just trying to spare you the complications," Michael insisted. "At your age, you shouldn't have to deal with property management and financial decisions." "At my age," I repeated slowly, feeling each of my 69 years in that moment. I deserve respect and honesty from my family, neither of which I've received. They left angry, Michael practically dragging Patricia out the door with final warnings about listening to Lily's exaggerations and misunderstanding their intentions. As their car pulled away, I felt both hollowed out and strangely empowered. The confrontation I dreaded was over, and I was still standing. "You did great, Grandma," Lily said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "What now?" "Now," I said, watching the taillights disappear down the street. "We follow Catherine's plan. Every step. The next months were among the most difficult of my life. With Catherine's guidance, I filed formal complaints with the bank and the police department. I revoked all authorizations given to Michael and Patricia. I changed the locks on my house, installed a security system, and had a formal capacity assessment done by a geriatric specialist who confirmed I was fully capable of managing my own affairs. The legal proceedings were exhausting. Michael hired an aggressive attorney who claimed I was being manipulated by Lily and Catherine. Patricia cried in court about how she'd only ever tried to help me and how hurtful these accusations were. Friends from church and the neighborhood were divided, some taking their side and viewing me as a confused old woman turning against her family. But evidence doesn't lie. Catherine brought in a handwriting expert who confirmed many of the signatures were skillful forgeries. Bank camera footage showed Patricia making withdrawals without me present, and when Tyler, my grandson, was called to testify, he unexpectedly broke ranks with his parents. They said Grandma wanted them to handle everything, he admitted, avoiding his father's furious gaze. But I heard them talking about using her money for the lake house they wanted to buy. And Mom said Grandma would never know because they'd just tell her the investments weren't doing well. That testimony was the turning point. The judge ruled decisively in my favor, ordering all property returned to my name and all funds repaid with interest. Michael and Patricia narrowly avoided criminal charges by agreeing to a settlement that included full restitution and covering all my legal fees. The victory felt hollow. I'd won back my property and my money, but I'd lost my son, at least for now. Michael refused to speak to me after the verdict, calling me stubborn and ungrateful. Patricia spread rumors in the community about how I'd lost my mind and turned against my own family. Only Tyler maintained contact, visiting occasionally with an awkward combination of guilt and relief. It was during one of these visits, nearly 8 months after the court case concluded, that Tyler revealed what had been happening with his parents. "They're in counseling," he said, fidgeting with his coffee cup in the kitchen where I'd once taught him to bake cookies. "Dad's firm put him on probation when they heard about the case. Ethics violation or something. They had to sell their house to pay you back. They're in an apartment now." I felt a twinge of sympathy, but reminded myself that consequences were necessary for healing to begin. "And how are you doing with all this?" Tyler shrugged, suddenly looking younger than his 24 years. "It's been hard, but also clarifying. I always knew something wasn't right about how they treated you after Grandpa died. I should have said something sooner. You spoke up when it counted," I assured him. That took courage. 6 more months passed. Lily graduated from college and started law school, inspired by Catherine's work in elder protection. I regained my financial footing and started volunteering at a senior center downtown, helping other older adults recognize and avoid financial exploitation. Life developed a new rhythm, different from what I'd imagined for my retirement years, but meaningful nonetheless. Then, on what would have been Richard and my 50th wedding anniversary, I received an unexpected visitor. Michael stood on my porch, thinner than I remembered, with new lines etched around his eyes. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking the confidence I'd always associated with my son. We sat in the living room, surrounded by photos chronicling our family's history. Happier times preserved in frames that had survived the upheaval. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. "I've been seeing a therapist," Michael finally said, staring at his hands, "trying to understand why I did what I did. Patricia and we're separated now." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I told myself we were helping you. That's how it started anyway. But then it became about what we wanted, what we felt entitled to." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "I betrayed everything you and Dad taught me about honesty and respect. I'm so sorry, Mom." I'd imagined this moment many times, sometimes with fury, sometimes with forgiveness. The reality was messier than either extreme. Why, Michael? That's what I still don't understand. We raised you to know better. He sighed deeply. It was gradual. After Dad died, Patricia kept saying we deserved some security for taking care of you. That since we'd inherit everything eventually anyway, why wait? I knew it was wrong, but I convinced myself it was justified. His voice broke. It wasn't. It was theft, plain and simple, from my own mother. We talked for hours that day, peeling back layers of rationalization and hurt. There were tears on both sides, recriminations, and eventually, the first tentative steps toward healing. I didn't fully trust him yet. That would take time and consistent actions. But I recognized genuine remorse when I saw it. 2 weeks later, I invited Michael and Tyler for Sunday dinner. Patricia wasn't included. Some bridges would take longer to rebuild, if ever. Lily drove up from Boston to join us, initially wary but willing to give her father a chance to make amends. As we sat around the table that had witnessed so much family history, I looked at the three faces before me, my son seeking redemption, my grandchildren representing hope for a better future, the empty chair where Richard should have been, the vacant spot where Patricia had once sat. Our family had been irrevocably changed, but not destroyed. Before we eat, I said, I want to say something. 3 pairs of eyes turned towards me expectantly. What happened in this family was devastating. Trust was broken. Healing will take time. But I want us all to understand something important. Property and money can be restored through courts and settlements. But family relationships can only be rebuilt through honesty, respect, and genuine change. Michael nodded solemnly. Lily reached for my hand. Tyler, in a gesture reminiscent of his grandfather, bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. 1 year after the court verdict, I found myself at the county clerk's office, finalizing my new estate plan. Catherine had helped me create a thoughtful arrangement, a trust that would provide for all 3 of my descendants while protecting against any future manipulation. Lily, now in her 2nd year of law school, had come home to accompany me. As we waited for the final documents, a familiar figure entered the office. Patricia, looking older and diminished without her carefully maintained appearance, stopped short when she saw us. For a moment it seemed she might leave, but instead she approached the clerk's counter and took a number, pointedly avoiding our gaze. Lily tensed beside me. Should we go, Grandma? No, I said quietly. We have every right to be here. When our number was called, we approached the counter. The clerk, a friendly woman named Marjorie who'd known Richard from his days working at the hardware store, smiled warmly. All set, Eleanor. Just need your signature on these final forms, and everything's official. As I signed my name, clearly and deliberately, I felt Patricia watching from across the room. Whether it was curiosity or regret that brought her there, I couldn't say. But as we gathered our documents and prepared to leave, Lily glanced in Patricia's direction and whispered just loud enough to be heard. She only came to see what she lost. I didn't respond immediately, instead reaching into my folder and withdrawing the copy of the trust document, signed and notarized. It represented not just the legal disposition of my assets, but the reclamation of my autonomy and dignity. Years of hard work, Richard's legacy, our family's future, all protected now from those who would exploit vulnerability for personal gain. Walking out into the autumn sunshine, I felt lighter than I had in years. At 69, I'd faced betrayal from those I trusted most, fought a system that often dismisses older voices, and emerged stronger. This wasn't the peaceful retirement Richard and I had planned, but perhaps it was the one I needed, a reminder that age doesn't diminish worth or rights. You know, I said to Lily, as we drove home through streets where the maples blazed with October color, Your grandfather used to say that true character shows not when things are easy, but when they're hard. He was right, Lily replied, navigating a turn with the confidence of youth. And he'd be so proud of you, Grandma. I smiled, watching the familiar landmarks of my town pass by the window. The bakery where Richard and I had bought our wedding cake 49 years earlier. The park where Michael had learned to ride a bike. The school where both Tyler and Lily had graduated. This place held my history, my present, and now securely my future. I think he'd be proud of all of us, I said, feeling Richard's presence as clearly as if he sat beside me. We protected what matters. We stood up for what's right. And most importantly, we're finding our way back to being a family. Different than before, but perhaps stronger for having been broken and mended. That evening, as Lily and I sat on the porch swing with mugs of tea, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. Trust, once shattered, doesn't reassemble without showing cracks. But I had reclaimed my voice, my property, and my power. At 69, I wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. The next chapter would be written on my terms. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.